it makes it a little bit more exciting, I think, if you
Mhm.
let yourself go and not worry about something being perfect and just enjoy the process of creativity and, um, like, I guess if you're working by yourself here, one of the things that may help to loosen you up is having somebody look at it and go,
Mhm.
what are you seeing here? Give me some ideas,"
Yeah.
right? Similar to what Sarah's doing here is just having somebody else kind of give you, or even if you post it on,
Mhm.
like a step of it. It takes a little bit of a courage to put yourself out there with something that's not finished and showing it to people and being able to communicate with them like, hey, I get it. This is not done, but what are you seeing here? Tell me what this looks like to you. And maybe I can like adapt it from what you're saying, the comments I'm getting on Facebook or Instagram or from the person in IRL, right?
Yeah.
So whatever that is can help guide you along to coming up with a cool new story.
And it is a really great exercise if you have a goal of being a writer, an illustrator, a creative person, is to do stuff like this, right? Not get so stuck in plot and formula and, sequencing and stuff like that, and to just sort of doodle or write, just start to create and see where it goes. It's a good exercise for your brain if you want to be a creative person to not be so stuck in rules and parameters and, knowing where you're going, and to just let yourself be creative and see what comes of it.
Yeah, I do wonder if this would be a really nice exercise if you're starting off your day and you have work to do, and then you're basically stuck a bit.
Hmm.
If you're an artist and you're like, oh man, I've got this project I've got to work on, and I have to really focus on, details and stuff. Well, maybe doing something like this where there's no pressure, you're just kind of playing around, having it's kind of as Sarah said, it's like doodling,
Hmm.
and essentially there's no like whether this is something you ever do anything with, whether or not, like maybe you do use this. It's just if you were to do something like this where you're kind of just warming yourself up for the day,
Hmm.
um, I I I I would imagine that would help you get into whatever project where you do have to focus a little bit more because this is helping sharpen your creativity, your hand-eye coordination. You now have, like new things you can potentially even use in your project. Like, let's say some of these characters are you can actually put into the story you're working on. So there's a lot of benefit out of doing something like this where you're just free forming it, like a freestyling it.
Yeah, and even if it's not something you ever do anything more with other than just kind of write something quick or doodle something quick, it's never wasted effort. And I think that's something that sometimes can be hard to wrap your head around. And it's like, "Oh, but I'm never gonna use this for anything." It's like, "No, but the actual exercise of doing that was a great exercise for your creative brain and to just get you in the mood to be able to then do the work that you have to do, right? Because as creatives, we would love to just create whatever we want all the time, but sometimes you have to create within parameters and rules, and they might not be things that you necessarily it's not maybe your own idea, but you have to get that creative hat on, and this is a great way to just get yourself into that creation mode.
So as a writer, what would you do that would be equivalent if you didn't have, let's say, an artist to work with?
Mhm. What I sometimes will do is I will just brainstorm a short story, right? Like, just start writing something and just see where it takes me, and sometimes it ends up being, like, a nugget that then turns into something bigger, like, I'm gonna save this because I did like where this went, but what can I do in a page, right? If I just start writing something, creating characters, that kind of thing. Another thing that I do a lot of is I like to create, videos and stuff like that on social. So a lot of times I'm just going through my camera roll, finding some B-roll of things, putting a thought against it, telling a story about it, like making a little storytelling experience out of, something that I happen to have taken a video of ages ago. That's a lot of times how I like to start my day is by just going through being like, what story could I tell with this as the background,
Well,
and
that's
then
good.
letting that kind of flow.
And are these things that were taught to you, or did you just like, is this just trial and error?
A lot of it was just I was a creative in an office for many years before I went out on my own, and a lot of it was the work that I would have to do was creative for hire, right? Like, it was very specific, like, I'm writing a 30-second commercial for this product, that kind of thing. So, I sort of had to take the time to do my own creative in order to get myself into a headspace where I could create creative for something that wasn't necessarily something I felt passionately about, right? That I was kinda like, "Okay, well, I can work on this." And the more I did that, the more I found that I just loved to write, right? And a lot of the things that started as those little nuggets I have turned into picture books or full out chapter books, middle grade novels, etc. But I always love to just start my day being like, just a fresh page, right? Let's just put something down. And then with the videos, that really came from getting good traction on social and being like, okay, people enjoy these little storytelling experiences that I put out there. How can I find ways to not just put something out for the sake of it, but to tell a story that engages people? That's what I truly love to do.
I mean, I think that the great thing about it is a lot of people who are like, "Oh, how do I get into this? How do I start? How do I
Mhm,
continue doing this?" Well, there you go. These are some ways for you to, like, uh, be creative to start something.
mhm.
Little pieces, right? Little short stories or little projects that don't take up a
100%.
lot of time but fulfill you, and then you start to, like running, it's like you start building up an endurance for doing something a little bit longer, a little bit more complicated, right? And that is similar to what I'm doing right here, right? So it's your if you have that project, this comic book you want to work on, or a graphic novel or a children's book, and it's like, oh my god, it's so intimidating to think about all the things I have to do. Well, if you start off with like one of these little bite-sized adventure type
Mhm.
fun, experiments that, no repercussions if you don't use it, right? It'll get you to be able to do something a little bit more, right? The next time.
Absolutely. And I know for a lot of people, what we are currently doing is the scariest thing possible, which is let's just hop on live with no idea what we're going to do and just create something. So doing that exercise doesn't have to be live, but doing that exercise and getting over that fear of what if I don't have a good idea, right? Because that's a lot of times, with a creative person and that blank page, it is that like, but what if I don't know what to put? What if I don't have a good idea? Like, how do I start? Just start. Just start with something and see where it goes, and then it'll become easier, right? Like, we knew confidently that we could pop on here with a simple, "Let me give you a location and see what happens," and come up with, a pretty well-rounded story relatively quickly because we do this all the time, right? So you just have to get into the habit of if you wanna be a creative, create, right? Like, just start actually doing the thing that you wanna do.
Yeah, and I have to keep on stressing that it's if you have this huge project in mind, and oftentimes that's all these stories you come up with are like, oh, they're multiple chapter
Yeah.
graphic novels of 150 pages, huge epic stories. And that becomes quite intimidating because once you're like,
Mhm.
oh, how do I even start that?
Yeah.
Right?
What's step 1?
Doing Yeah, like, what's step 1? Well, it's really the same step that we're doing right here, which is just, taking a prompt, and what's the idea we can make from a cave that
Mhm,
is now, starting to become like this, uh, bigger story, but we're still able to kind of evoke
mhm,
the feelings of it, the beats of it in a single illustration, right? The conflict, uh, maybe the fear that these creatures are having for each other, like all of those things. You just see what happens. You just try it, but it's something that if it doesn't work, then you haven't wasted a whole lot of time. You maybe put an hour of
Yeah.
time into something, and it's still you can still learn from that, right? So, um, and then thinking about, okay, well, if I want to do this longer form project, um, maybe I would, instead of really starting with that, just do a couple of these in a week and seeing what that feels like, to have a consistent schedule of these
Mhm.
like little short form projects. Try to build that up to maybe 3 or 4 in a week, where you're doing it every morning for like 30 minutes to an hour. So you're actually building up your endurance, and there's still nothing that's like really intimidating, because if you don't like what you're creating, you can just like move on to the next thing, right? So before you get into that really big project, I guess what I'm saying is try these small little bite-sized ones,
Mhm.
see if it's something that you actually enjoy doing, and build up a bit of an endurance for when you can get to maybe start working on that bigger project.
Absolutely. And I think too what's really interesting about this particular one is as much as this is a single image that if you looked at it, you'd be like, "Oh, this is cool. Like there's a monster and some creatures." If we were to put the little short story beside it that we talked about, you could see details in here that you wouldn't have necessarily noticed until the short story existed, right? Like the cave drawings, the fact that these are frog-like creatures, that this guy's mutated, that they're looking outside the cave. There's so many things that are made richer by the storytelling we came up with and those layers that were added in. And that's another thing to always try and do is, you do your first blush with the main things, and it's like, what other things can I hide in there? Can I include in there for somebody to be able to discover? Because there's nothing more satisfying to someone who is enjoying your art, whether they're reading it or looking at it, and seeing things that they didn't notice the first time. That's how you start to build up audiences that really appreciate what you do because it's like, "Oh, when I first looked, I didn't even notice those cave drawings, but now that I see them, it's like, oh,
Mhm.
that's that whole story," right? So, those are the kinds of things that can up your level as an artist as well as when you can figure out how to put some of that nuance into your creations.
Yeah, actually, I really like that idea. So, like, maybe taking it one step further, let's say you have a bunch of these single
Mhm,
page illustrations you've worked on, and whether it's on the writing side, where you just like,
mhm,
start writing a story from nothing about a cave, see what happens, and then maybe you want to draw it. You're, like, so you've maybe sat on this single page story for a while. You can go back to it and draw some illustrations, or vice versa, right? As Sarah was saying, you can actually, you've drawn something, you've doodled something out, and then maybe next week, when you've had a bit of distance from it, you can go back to it and go, what is the story with this? Let me think of it. Let me see if I can
mhm,
come up with the story that I was thinking about as I was doing it. Now, there's a world where you can actually draw something and then immediately write down anything that comes to mind from it. So you have it present,
mhm,
present mind, and then you can go back to it later and flesh it out more. Or if you're working, collaborating like as Sarah and I are doing here, you can, the both of you can just like sit on what you've done, and then come back to it a few days later and go, okay, so do we still feel the same about this? Well, what are some of the more details that we can like
mhm,
flesh out a bit, right? So you can take something that really doesn't mean anything, that it wasn't intended for anything, and add more to it down the line. Like you could, post it onto social media in a couple weeks, now, since you've had distance from it, and go, hey, what do you think is the next thing that's going to happen in this
mhm.
scenario, and maybe get people's feedback and then add to it, right? Like you can do multiple things with this, or if you're a sculptor, you can sculpt out the character, whatever it is, right?
Absolutely, and I think that from that social media point of view, that's a great way to start conversations. It's like, "What do you see in this cave?" Right? And people are gonna have very different ideas and opinions and thoughts. Some people might hit what you were thinking, other people might go completely different, and then it's like, "Here's the real story, now look at it." It's like, "Wow, now that you told me the story, I see all the things," and that's a really fun way to engage with your audience as well. Another thing that's always great to do too, if you wanna do some more of these little bite-sized pieces of content, is put out an anthology, right? Where you have your illustrations and your short story with it in a collection, because there's something really fun about that too, where people do like bite-sized content, right? Some people don't wanna necessarily always read a 150-page graphic novel. Some people wanna look at that single image, read the short story, and look at that image again. So there's many different ways to be creative. It doesn't always have to be a long form story to be valuable creative.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's one of the pieces of advice I do give beginning comic book creators is find an anthology.
Mhm.
There's usually places you can go online. You just Google it, and there's always like open calls for a specific kind of like, an anthology about monsters or
Yeah.
something about love or whatever it is about. And
Mhm.
then you write a story or draw something for it, and hopefully they'll accept it. But it is a great way for you to if some oftentimes they'll if you're an artist looking for a writer, they'll match you up with one, and vice versa. So it's a
Mhm.
great way to meet people in the community, and to get something actually published that you can have as a portfolio piece or something you can sell if you were going to be at a show.
Absolutely, and getting something like that under your belt is also a really nice feeling, right? To be able to actually put your work out into the world without having to go through, creating the entire full huge thing yourself, years of work, let's say. It's like you can have a little bit of more instant gratification of work that you've done is being seen by people and enjoyed. And that will motivate you to continue creating. One of the first things I put out when I started doing my books was an anthology series called Crimes, Covens, and Curses. And they're 10 short mysteries that you are participating in. So the answers are at the back of the book. You read the mystery, you go to the back and read how it ends. So you get the opportunity as the reader to see if you can solve it before you read how it ends. And that was a really great way for me to get something out there without, having to create a massive, massive story, that was from beginning to end and huge. These were just a bunch of short stories that you could get into the world. People could enjoy them in little spurts. So not everything has to be a massive undertaking to be worthwhile.
So is this those anthologies you did them by yourself? Like you drew and wrote the
They're
whole
not
thing?
drawn. No, they're just written.
Oh,
These are
they're
just
just
written
written. Okay.
anthologies, because that was more what I knew I could do myself, right? Because part of it too, sometimes when you're
Mm.
just starting out, is you want to make sure that you don't overdo it. Like for me, art is painstaking. I do it and I can do it and I have done it, but it is a process. For me, words come so much easier, which is why I like to partner with great artists to help me, because I know that my time could be better spent on the writing than the drawing when other people are so much better at it than I am.
But it's also a matter, I think, of you know, enjoying it, right? It's
Yes,
you'll get better at something if it's something that drives you to get better at, right? But to your
absolutely.
point, the thing that really scratched your itch was the writing aspect of it. So,
Yes,
you know, lean into the things that you're into. And, it what it does mean though is as a writer, you can still lay something out very roughly and maybe show it to an artist, especially if you're trying to communicate like a complicated type of blocking
100%.
scene stage of what things are doing from moment to moment. You can go, okay, here's a clear way to do. I wrote it. Now here's a like the character moves across the room like this and draw it
Yes,
out. And it could be a stick figure, right?
exactly. And that's always something that I enjoy working with artists, when you can have those kinds of conversations, right? Where it isn't, I don't like being prescriptive. As you probably have noted from how we work together, is I don't like being like, okay, I'm thinking of a cave. This is what the cave looks like. This is what's in it. Now create it. I much prefer being like, here's a broad thing that I'm envisioning. Keith and I have worked on a number of other projects, and my preference is always let let an artist do what they do and not overprescribe to the point that I'm now boxing them into my best ability versus their best ability, because my ability at art obviously not as good, and if I start prescribing what it should look like, I'll miss out on really good things that the artist is able to bring that I might not have thought of.